That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine training became a moment every soldier on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and doing what's right. The sun hung low over the arid expanse of Camp Pendleton, casting long shadows across the training fields where the Marine Corps' K-9 unit assembled at dawn. Sergeant Elena Vasquez stood at attention, her boots planted firmly in the dew-kissed sand, the weight of her utility uniform a familiar anchor. At her side, Rex, her Belgian Malinois, sat rigid, his ears perked forward, dark eyes scanning the horizon with unerring focus. The air carried the sharp tang of salt from the nearby Pacific, mingled with the faint scent of gun oil and wet earth from the night's mist. "Unit, form up!" barked Master Sergeant Harlan Crow, his voice cutting through the quiet like a rifle crack. He paced the line of handlers and their dogs, his polished boots kicking up small puffs of dust. Crow was a veteran of 2 deployments, his face etched with the lines of commands given and lives saved or lost in the unforgiving sands of the Middle East. Under his watch, the K-9 teams drilled with precision, scent detection, perimeter sweeps, and obedience exercises that blurred the line between human directive and canine instinct. Elena had been with Rex for 3 years, ever since he'd been paired with her after excelling in the grueling selection at Lackland Air Force Base. Their bond was forged in silence, long nights of patrol simulations where Rex's nose led them through mock villages, his low growl the only warning before a simulated threat. She knew his every twitch, the subtle flick of his tail when he caught a familiar scent, the way his shoulders tensed under her gloved hand during a sit command. Loyalty wasn't spoken here, it was etched in the rhythm of their shared breaths, the steady cadence of heel and paw on patrol. The morning's exercise was standard, a search and rescue drill in the mock urban shelter, a concrete bunker designed to mimic collapsed structures in disaster zones. The teams were to locate victims, mannequins hidden in the dim confines, their scents masked by debris and chemicals. Elena clipped Rex's lead, feeling the familiar vibration of his energy through the leather. "Easy, boy," she murmured, her voice low and steady, as they approached the shelter's entrance. Around them, other handlers issued clipped commands. Seek, find. Radios crackled with updates from the observation post, the hum of a distant Black Hawk adding to the disciplined hum of the base. But as Eleanor guided Rex toward the shadowed doorway, he halted. His body went rigid, paws digging into the gravel, a low rumble building in his throat. She tugged gently on the lead. "Rex, forward." No response. His nose worked the air, nostrils flaring, but he refused to advance, hackles rising along his spine. Elena knelt beside him, running a hand along his flank, feeling the rapid pulse beneath his fur. "What is it, partner? Talk to me." Rex's eyes locked on hers, then flicked back to the shelter, his whine sharp and insistent. Crow noticed immediately, striding over with his clipboard in hand. "Vasquez, what's the hold-up? We're on the clock." His tone was even, but the edge was there. Protocol demanded seamless execution. The other teams paused, dogs sitting alert, handlers exchanging glances. In the K-9 unit, hesitation wasn't just inefficiency. It could mean the difference between detection and disaster in the field. "Sir, Rex isn't responding," Elena reported, keeping her voice level, though her gut twisted. Rex had never balked before, not in live-fire exercises, not during the chaos of a night-op simulation. She scanned the shelter's mouth, rusted metal door ajar. Faint echo of dripping water inside. No anomalies on the surface, but Rex's instincts were sharper than any tech. Crow crouched, extending a hand toward Rex, who leaned away with a warning snap of jaws. "Stand down, Sergeant. He's trained for this. If he's picking up a false positive, we push through." The master's words carried the weight of chain of command, obedience above all. Elena hesitated, her fingers tightening on the lead. Rex's refusal wasn't defiance. It was a signal, raw and unfiltered. In their world, the dog's nose was the ultimate authority, trusted over human doubt in the haze of combat or crisis. But orders were orders. Crow rose, his gaze hardening. "Vasquez, advance. That's a direct command." The unit watched. The morning breeze whispering through the tents in the distance, carrying the faint scent of coffee from the mess hall. Elena's mind raced. Protocol dictated compliance, yet every fiber urged her to trust Rex. This was more than a drill. It felt like the edge of something deeper, a test of the bond that had carried them through sandstorms and shadows. She took a step forward, lead in hand. Rex resisted, planting his feet, his whine escalating to a bark that echoed off the concrete. "Rex, heel!" she commanded, sharper now, but he held his ground, eyes fixed on the darkness within. Crow's radio buzzed, another team reporting success from a side entrance. But here, the air thickened with unspoken tension. Elena's hand trembled slightly on the lead, the first crack in her disciplined facade. What if Rex was right? What if pushing him meant ignoring the very instincts that made them unbreakable? In that moment, as the sun climbed higher and painted the shelter in stark relief, Elena faced her first fracture. Follow the chain, or honor the silent pact with the partner who had never led her wrong. The base stirred around them, boots on gravel, a distant whistle from the parade grounds. But inside the unit, a quiet defiance took root, one paw at a time. Little did they know, this refusal was no false alarm. It was the whisper of a crisis unfolding, hidden in the shelter's depths, waiting to pull them all into its moral undertow. Elena stood frozen for a beat longer than protocol allowed, the leather lead taut in her grip like a lifeline stretched to breaking. Rex's bark reverberated off the shelter's concrete walls, sharp and unyielding, drawing stares from the other handlers. The unit's rhythm faltered, dogs shifting uneasily on their haunches, radios falling silent, as the morning exercise ground to a hesitant pause. Master Sergeant Crow's face tightened, the lines around his eyes deepening under the relentless California sun, now cresting the horizon, turning the dew to vapor that clung to their boots. "Vasquez!" Crow repeated, his voice dropping to that low timbre reserved for corrections that bordered on reprimands. "I won't ask again. Advance your position. The drill waits for no one." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over Rex, who responded with another low growl, body coiled but not aggressive, just resolute. In the K9 world, this wasn't rebellion. It was communication, primal and precise. Elena's pulse quickened, syncing with the rapid rise and fall of Rex's flanks. She knew the manual by heart. Handlers override K9 alerts only under verified false positives. But here, doubt gnawed at her certainty. The shelter loomed, its entrance a yawning void, framed by weathered rebar, the faint drip of condensation echoing like a distant metronome. "Sir, permission to assess," Elena ventured, her words measured, eyes meeting his without flinching. Chain of command was sacred, forged in the fires of boot camp and battlefields where hesitation cost lives. But Rex's instincts had saved her team twice before, once sniffing out an IED during a joint exercise in Nevada. Ignoring him now felt like betraying not just her partner, but the core trust that bound them. Crow exhaled sharply, glancing at his watch. The observation post crackled to life on his radio. "Control to Crow. Teams 3 and 4 clear. Vasquez overdue." "Make it quick," Crow conceded, though his stance screamed reluctance. 2 minutes. If it's nothing, you push through. Understood." Elena nodded crisply, saluting with her free hand before kneeling beside Rex. The gravel bit into her knees through her fatigues, the earthy scent of disturbed soil mixing with Rex's warm, familiar musk. "Good boy," she whispered, her gloved fingers tracing the ridge of his spine, feeling the tremor beneath. Show me. She unclipped the lead partially, giving him slack to work, and Rex surged forward, not into the shelter but along its perimeter, nose low to the ground, tail low and focused. The other handlers murmured, their dogs whining in sympathy, as Elena followed Rex's lead around the bunker's side. The structure was a relic from Cold War drills, its walls scarred by decades of simulated blasts, vines creeping up the seams like forgotten sentinels. Rex circled a rusted drainage grate half buried in the dirt, his paws scrabbling at the edge. Elena dropped to one knee again, peering into the narrow slit. Darkness swallowed the view, but a faint, irregular rustle emanated from below, too rhythmic for wind, too soft for vermin. Her heart thudded against her ribs. "Rex, sit." He obeyed instantly, but his eyes remained glued to the grate, a soft whine escaping his throat. Crow approached from behind, his boots crunching gravel. "Report, Sergeant." Eleanor straightened, wiping a smudge of dirt from her glove. "Possible anomaly, sir. Rex is alerting here, not the main entrance." She gestured to the grate, the metal warped and clogged with leaves. Crow's brow furrowed as he crouched, the lines of his uniform creasing sharply. He shone a penlight into the opening, the beam cutting through dust motes. "Looks like runoff. Could be a raccoon or debris." But even as he spoke, the rustle grew, a muffled scrape, then a hitch like labored breathing. Elena's mind raced through protocols. Unauthorized entry during drills required clearance, but this felt beyond simulation. The base's K9 unit wasn't just for show. They were the tip of the spear in real ops, from border patrols to disaster response. Last week, a civilian contractor had mentioned a missing child from the nearby town. 8-year-old Tommy Ellis vanished during a family hike, his photo plastered on the mess hall bulletin. Search parties had combed the hills, but the shelter's remote corner was off the grid. Coincidence? Or had the boy, disoriented, stumbled into this forgotten pit? "Sir, this could be—" A voice cut through the grate, faint and fractured like wind through dry reeds. "Help, please." Elena's blood ran cold. Rex bolted to the edge, nose pressed to the metal, his body vibrating with urgency. Crow froze, radio already to his lips. "Control, this is Crow. Possible civilian in distress at Mock Shelter Alpha. Alert base security and medics. Now." The line erupted in static bursts of acknowledgement. The base's alert siren wailing faintly in the distance, a piercing wail that shattered the morning calm. Elena worked the grate's edge with her multi-tool, muscles straining against the corrosion, while Rex paced beside her, ears pinned back. "Hold on!" she called into the dark, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her veins. The boy's response was a gasp, then words too soft to catch fully. Something about the seal and a name whispered like a secret talisman. Elena's thoughts flickered to her own past. Before the Marines, she'd trained under a retired SEAL instructor, a man named Harlan Reyes, whose stories of loyalty in the shadows had drawn her to this life. Was that the name? The connection tugged at her. But duty clamped it down. Focus on extraction, not ghosts. Crow coordinated with arriving responders, his commands crisp over the growing chatter of boots and voices. The first security detail arrived in a Humvee, tires skidding on the access road, medics spilling out with stretchers and floodlights. Elena pried the grate free with a final grunt, the metal screeching in protest, revealing a narrow shaft dropping 5 feet into a flooded subchamber. There, huddled on a ledge above brackish water, was the boy, pale, shivering, his small frame smeared with mud. His eyes, wide with exhaustion, locked on Rex first, then Elena. The dog. "He came," the boy murmured, extending a trembling hand as Rex leaned in, licking his fingers gently. As the medics lowered a harness, Elena clipped Rex's lead back on, her hand lingering on his head in silent gratitude. The unit gathered at a respectful distance, handlers nodding approval, the earlier tension dissolving into purposeful action. But Crow pulled her aside as the boy was lifted out, his expression a mix of relief and scrutiny. "You trusted the dog over orders, Vasquez. That could have been a court-martial if it was nothing." His words hung heavy, the weight of institutional eyes upon them. The base commander en route, reports already filing up the chain. Elena met his gaze, chin lifted. "Sir, Rex doesn't lie. Neither do I." The boy, now wrapped in a blanket, glanced back from the stretcher, whispering again, "Reyes." The SEAL said to call, if lost, and die. The name echoed in Elena's mind, a ripple through her resolve. This wasn't just a rescue, it was a fracture in the routine, exposing the raw edge where obedience met intuition. As the helicopter's rotors thrummed overhead, bearing the boy to safety, Elena felt the first stirrings of consequence, the unit's faith in her tested, the system's gears turning toward judgment. In the world of ranks and leashes, one whisper could unravel it all, forcing choices that echoed far beyond the shelter's shadows. The medevac chopper's downdraft whipped sand across the training field, scattering grit against Elena's fatigues as she watched the bird lift off, its skids vanishing into the blue above Camp Pendleton. The boy's stretcher was secured inside, medics bent over him, the faint thump of rotors fading into the afternoon haze. Rex sat at her heel, his tongue lolling slightly, the adrenaline ebbing from his frame in a subtle relaxation of his shoulders. Elena's hand rested on his collar, the worn leather warm from the sun, grounding her amid the swirl of activity. Security personnel cordoned off the shelter site, yellow tape fluttering in the breeze, while handlers from the unit milled at the edges, their dogs on short leads, eyes flicking between the scene and their superiors. Master Sergeant Crow stood a few paces away, radio pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing sharply to the arriving base commander, Colonel Marcus Hale. Hale was a tall figure, his uniform starched to perfection, the silver eagles on his shoulders catching the light as he descended from a staff car. His presence alone shifted the air. Conversations hushed, postures straightened, the chain of command manifesting in the snap of salutes. Elena felt the weight of it settle on her like an extra pack, her pulse steady, but her mind replaying the boy's whisper. Reyes, the SEAL, Harlan Reyes, her old instructor, the man whose tales of unbreakable bonds in the shadows had pulled her from civilian life into the Corps. How had the boy known that name? And why here, in this forgotten corner of the base? "Vasquez," Crow called, his voice cutting through the murmur. "Debrief with the colonel. Now." She clipped Rex's lead fully, falling into step beside Crow as they approached Hale. The colonel's eyes, sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses, scanned her first, then the dog, assessing without warmth. "Report," he said simply, his tone devoid of inflection, as if dictating a log entry. Elena stood at attention, Rex mirroring her stillness at her side. "Sir, during the search and rescue drill, Rex alerted on a perimeter anomaly, a drainage grate adjacent to the mock shelter. Upon investigation, we located the missing civilian, Tommy Ellis. Extraction was completed without incident." She kept her words precise, omitting the hesitation, the refusal at the entrance that had sparked it all. But Hale's gaze lingered, unfooled. Crow filled the gap, his report clipped. The balking dog. The override of initial orders, the unauthorized probe that uncovered the boy. The colonel's jaw tightened imperceptibly, the faint creak of his leather belt, audible in the brief silence. "This boy, how does he end up on base property?" Hale directed the question at no one in particular, but Eleanor felt it aimed her way. Local news had buzzed for days about Tommy's disappearance. Last seen hiking the bluffs with his father, a civilian engineer attached to the base's construction crew. Search teams from the sheriff's department had scoured the coastal trails, But the mock shelter's subchamber was a blind spot, tucked away from main paths. Elena's thoughts snagged on the whisper again. Reyes. Had the boy overheard stories, or was there more? A connection buried in the routine of base life. Before she could respond, a sheriff's deputy approached, badge glinting under the sun, his notebook at the ready. "Sergeant Vasquez, we're coordinating with base security. The kid's stable. Dehydrated, minor cuts, but he's asking for you and the dog." Hale nodded approval, and Elena followed the deputy to a waiting ambulance parked on the access road, Rex trotting obediently. The vehicle's doors stood open, the interior shadowed against the glare, the scent of antiseptic sharp in the air. Tommy lay on the gurney, an IV drip in his arm, his small face pale but alert. A medic adjusted the blanket, murmuring reassurances. Elena approached slowly, Rex at her side, his nose twitching toward the boy. "Hey, Tommy, I'm Sergeant Vasquez. This is Rex. You did good holding on." The boy's eyes brightened, locking on the dog first, then her. He reached out a hand, fingers curling into Rex's fur when the Malinois leaned in, tail giving a single wag. "He knew," Tommy whispered, voice hoarse from disuse. "I was stuck. Fell in at night. Called out. But no one heard. Then I remembered what the SEAL said. Hale and Crow had trailed them, standing just outside the ambulance, their shadows long across the tarmac. The deputy jotted notes, the pen scratching faintly. "The SEAL?" Elena prompted gently, kneeling to Tommy's level, her uniform brushing the vehicle's step. The boy nodded, eyes distant. "My dad's friend, Mr. Reyes. He visits sometimes, tells stories about dogs and soldiers, said if I ever got lost, whisper his name, they'd find me. Like a code." The words hung, simple yet loaded, the air in the ambulance thickening. Harlan Reyes, retired SEAL, occasional consultant to the base's training programs. Elena's connection to him was no secret in the unit. He'd mentored her during her early days, emphasizing the dog's intuition over rigid protocol. But hearing it now, from this child, twisted the knife of consequence. Hale cleared his throat from the doorway. "Reyes, the instructor?" His tone carried an edge, not suspicion, but the institutional grind. Any deviation from drill parameters invited scrutiny. Crow shifted, boots scraping the gravel. "Sir," Vasquez's actions were improvisational, but effective. The colonel's response was measured. "Effective or not, protocol exists for a reason. We'll review the logs. Vasquez, you're off rotation pending investigation. Report to my office at 0800 tomorrow." The order landed like a dropped magazine, final and echoing. Elena saluted, her arm steady, though inside, the moral fault line widened. Her trust in Rex had saved a life, yet it challenged the very structure that protected them all. As the ambulance doors closed and pulled away, sirens silent for the short haul to the hospital, the unit dispersed under Crow's direction. Handlers led their dogs back to kennels, the clink of leads and soft commands filling the air. Elena lingered by the shelter, Rex pressing against her leg, his warmth a quiet anchor. The grate lay pried open nearby, a jagged mouth now silent. But the boy's whisper echoed in her mind, a bridge between past lessons and present reckoning. Word would spread through the mess hall, the barracks, even off base to the media sniffing for heroism. Her defiance, born of loyalty, now faced the tribunal of ranks, where conscience clashed with command. That evening, as the sun dipped toward the Pacific, painting the tents in amber, Elena reviewed the day's logs in the handler's ready room. The fluorescent hum overhead mixed with the distant bark of a night patrol dog, the scent of chow lingering from dinner. Crow entered, closing the door with a soft click. "The colonel's not wrong," he said, leaning against the desk, his face softened by fatigue. "But neither are you. Rex saved that kid. Just Prepare for the questions. Integrity's a double-edged blade here." Elena nodded, her fingers tracing Rex's tag on the table. The cost was clear. Potential reprimand, a mark on her record, ripples through the unit's trust in canine overrides. Yet in the quiet, with Rex's steady gaze upon her, she felt the stir of something larger, a legacy of moral choice where one dog's refusal could redefine the line between order and right. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories of courage and integrity can reach. The fluorescent lights of the handler's ready room buzzed faintly overhead, casting a sterile glow on the metal desks cluttered with logbooks and scent kits. Elena sat at the edge of a folding chair, her fingers drumming a silent rhythm on the tabletop, the worn grain rough under her calluses. Rex lay at her feet, his head resting on his paws, one ear twitching at the distant rumble of a supply truck rolling past the barracks. The air carried the faint, acrid tang of cleaning solvent from the adjacent kennels, mingling with the earthy residue of the day's dust still clinging to her boots. It was nearing 2200 hours, the base settling into its nocturnal hush. Patrol lights sweeping the perimeter, the occasional crackle of a radio from the command post. She'd spent the afternoon reviewing protocols, her mind a loop of contingencies. Article 92 of the UCMJ on failure to obey orders, the K9 manual's clauses on handler discretion during alerts. Trusting Rex had been instinct, not insubordination, but the line blurred under scrutiny. Harlan Reyes's name lingered like a shadow. His retired status didn't exempt him from base affiliations, and if the boy had learned that code from him during a casual visit, it could drag old mentorships into the light. Elena glanced at Rex, his dark eyes meeting hers with that unwavering calm, a silent affirmation that cut through her doubt. Their bond wasn't protocol, it was the quiet certainty that had pulled her through her first deployment, when Rex's nose had traced a hidden cache in the Afghan hills. A knock at the door pulled her upright. Private Lance Torres entered, his uniform crisp despite the late hour, a stack of folders under his arm. Torres was the unit's junior admin, fresh from MOS school, his face boyish under the regulation buzz cut. "Sergeant Vasquez, sir, ma'am. Colonel Hale's aide sent these, prelim reports on the Ellis kid." He handed them over, saluting before retreating, the door clicking shut behind him. Elena flipped open the top file, the paper crisp and official, stamped with the base's seal. Tommy Ellis, age 8, son of civilian contractor Daniel Ellis, reported missing 48 hours prior during a supervised hike on the coastal bluffs. No signs of foul play, just a toddler's misstep into underbrush that led him farther afield. The shelter's subchamber wasn't on any public map. Overgrown access. Forgotten since the last major exercise in 18. Deeper in, a transcribed interview from the hospital, Tommy's account, halting and childlike, pieced together by the sheriff's investigator. "I fell. Dark. Cold water. Yelled for Dad, but echo only. Then the dog barked outside like he heard me special. And the whisper, Mr. Reyes said, tell the soldier his name if lost. The dog would know." Elena's breath caught. The innocence of it clashed with the gravity now unfolding. Reyes had consulted on K9 integration last spring, sharing SEAL tactics on intuitive partnerships during informal sessions at the rec center. Tommy's father worked construction. Likely the boy had tagged along, absorbing stories meant for adults. But in the colonel's eyes, this could paint her actions as premeditated deviation, leveraging personal ties over chain directives. She closed the file as footsteps approached, heavy, measured, the cadence of authority. Master Sergeant Crow pushed through the door, his silhouette framed against the hall's dim emergency lighting. Vasquez couldn't sleep. His tone was gruff, but not unkind, the lines of exhaustion etching deeper into his weathered face. He pulled up a chair, the legs scraping softly on the linoleum, and sat, elbows on knees. Rex lifted his head, assessing, before settling back with a soft huff. "Reviewing, sir," Elena replied, stacking the folders neatly, "trying to get ahead of tomorrow." Crow nodded, rubbing his jaw, the faint stubble rasping under his fingers. He'd been her evaluator during quals, the one who'd signed off on her pairing with Rex after watching them navigate a blind scent trail in pouring rain. Loyalty ran both ways in the unit, handlers to dogs, sergeants to their teams, but the institution demanded balance. "The Colonel's calling a formal inquiry at 0800, Crow said, voice low. "Not a tribunal yet, but close. Hale's got Jag on speed dial. That grate wasn't flagged as a hazard if the kid sues or media spins it as negligence." He trailed off, the implication hanging. Camp Pendleton's K9 program was a point of pride, showcased in congressional briefings integral to joint ops, but one unchecked anomaly could invite audits, budget cuts, the slow erosion of trust in K9 assets. Elena's defiance, however noble, spotlighted the friction. When did a dog's alert supersede orders? Rex shifted, pressing his flank against her calf, his warmth seeping through her pants leg like a reminder. "Sir, Rex's refusal at the entrance, it wasn't random. He rerouted us to the grate. If I'd forced entry per protocol." Crow held up a hand, silencing her. "I know, but Hale sees protocol as the backbone. You bent it, Vasquez. Saved a life, sure, but now the sheriff's department wants statements, and the boy's father is grateful. Sent a note through channels, but grateful doesn't shield records." He paused, eyes flicking to Rex. "The dog's the hero here. Question is, can we prove it without making you the scapegoat?" The conversation stretched, procedural details unfolding like a briefing map. Witness statements from the other handlers. Time-stamped video from the observation post showing Rex's bulk and her detour. Crow sketched contingencies on a notepad, the emphasis on Rex's certified detection rate, her spotless service jacket from 2 tours. Yet beneath the tactics, Elena felt the moral undercurrent. Obedience built the machine, but conscience oiled its humanity. Reyes's lessons echoed. Dogs don't salute, they sense truth. Honor that, or you're just walking a shadow. By 2300, Crow departed with a curt, "Rest up," leaving Elena to walk Rex through the cooling night. The base paths were lit by sodium lamps, casting pools of orange on the pavement, slick with evening dew. Rex's nails clicked steadily beside her, his nose occasionally lifting to sample the breeze, carrying hints of ocean salt and distant diesel. They paused at the kennel block, the chain-link fences rattling softly in the wind, shadows of other dogs stirring in their runs. Elena knelt, clipping him to his post, her hand lingering on his muzzle. "We did right, partner," she murmured, the words more for herself. His eyes held hers, steady as a compass, before he turned to settle on his bedding. Back in her quarters, a Spartan room with a single bunk, footlocker and wall-mounted photo of her and Rex post-qualification, Elena lay awake, the thin mattress creaking under her weight. The clock's digital glow marked 0330 when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number routed through base comms. "Sergeant Vasquez, Daniel Ellis. Tommy's resting. Thank you." Reyes would be proud. She stared at the screen, the words blurring slightly. Pride from a ghost, gratitude from a father, small anchors against the storm of inquiry. But dawn would bring the reckoning. Uniforms in formation, questions under oath, the weight of eyes judging not just her actions, but the fragile trust between human command and canine truth. As the first hints of grey light filtered through the blinds, Elena rose, dressing with mechanical precision, fatigues pressed, boots laced tight. Rex would wait in the kennel during the hearing, but his presence lingered in every breath, a silent testament. The base stirred, Reveille horns in the distance, the low hum of generators kicking on. Whatever judgment came, she'd face it squared. The boys whisper a talisman against the rigid tide. In the ranks, integrity wasn't rewarded with fanfare. It was tested in silence, one order at a time. The inquiry room in Building 14 felt like a pressure chamber, its walls panelled in faded oak that absorbed sound rather than echoed it. Elena entered at precisely 0755, her boots polished to a mirror sheen. The faint squeak of the door hinge the only prelude to her arrival. Rex was back at the kennel, his absence a hollow space at her side, but she could almost feel his steady presence in the way she squared her shoulders. The air hung heavy with the scent of stale coffee from a side table and the underlying must of old files stacked in metal cabinets. Fluorescent bulbs hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the long conference table where Colonel Hale sat flanked by two JAG officers, Captain Lydia Grant, her notebook open like a shield, and Major Elias Thorne, arms crossed, his uniform insignia glinting under the lights. "Sergeant Vasquez," Hale began, his voice even, gesturing to the chair opposite. "At ease. This is an informal review, your statement for the record." Eleanor sat, spine rigid, hands folded on her lap, the fabric of her fatigues whispering against the vinyl seat. No recorder yet, but she knew the protocol. Every word logged, every pause dissected. The room's single window overlooked the parade grounds, where a distant platoon drilled in formation, their cadence calls filtering in like a muffled heartbeat, left, right, left. Grant leaned forward, pen poised. "Walk us through the drill from the initial alert, Sergeant. Be precise." Eleanor nodded, her voice steady as she recounted the morning, the unit's assembly at dawn, Rex's refusal at the shelter entrance, the tug of the lead against his unyielding stance. She described the gravel underfoot, the sun's warmth building on their backs, Crow's command to advance. "I assessed, sir." Rex rerouted to the grate. That's when we heard the voice. No embellishment, just facts, the way she'd been trained in after-action reports, each detail a brick in the wall of accountability. Thorne interjected, his tone clipped, flipping through a tablet with time-stamped footage from the observation post. "Yet you deviated from the primary entry point, Protocol 47B. Handlers maintain vector unless overridden by superior. Master Sergeant Crow authorized a brief check, but your extraction bypassed security clearance." The video played softly on his screen, grainy but clear. Rex digging at the grate, Elena's multi-tool prying metal, the boy's faint cry piercing the static. Elena met his gaze, her pulse a controlled thrum in her throat. "Sir, the alert was active. Delay risked the civilian's condition. Rex's certification includes urban anomaly detection, 99% accuracy in trials." Hale steepled his fingers, the silver ring on his hand catching the light. "And this SEAL's name the boy mentioned? Reyes, your connection?" The question landed like a probe, testing for cracks. Elena had anticipated it, her mind mapping responses during the sleepless hours before dawn. Harlan Reyes, retired, not active duty, but his influence lingered in her Qualls packet, a signed endorsement from 5 years back. "Instructor during my pre-corps training, sir. Civilian now, occasional guest lecturer on K9 tactics. The boy must have overheard during a base visit. His father's a contractor." No defensiveness. Just truth, delivered with the flat intonation of a briefing. The door opened mid-sentence, admitting Master Sergeant Crow and Private Torres, who carried a projector case. Crow saluted crisply, taking a seat beside Elena, his presence a subtle buffer. "Additional evidence, Colonel," he said, nodding to Torres, who dimmed the lights and cued a file. The screen flickered to life with Rex's training logs, scent trails navigated in zero visibility, alerts on buried simulants during flood exercises. "Vasquez's team holds the unit's top compliance rate," Crow added, his voice gravel-rough from years of field commands. The dog's refusal wasn't anomaly, it was precision, saved the op and the kid. Grant scribbled notes, the pen's scratch amplifying in the quiet. Outside, a Black Hawk thumped low over the runway, its rotor wash rattling the window panes, a reminder of the world beyond this room where missions didn't pause for inquiries. Thorne paused the video, zooming on the Great's image. Impressive, but the breach exposes vulnerabilities. That subchamber, unmapped, unsecured. If media gets wind, its headlines, "Base neglects child in drill site." Hale's expression remained impassive, but Elena caught the flicker in his eyes, the institutional calculus weighing unit pride against liability. The review stretched, questions layering like sandbags, timelines cross-checked against radio logs, witness statements from handlers who had seen Rex's focus, the boy's hospital eval confirming no prior base access beyond escorted visits. Elena answered without hesitation, her hands still on her lap, though the room's chill seeped through her sleeves. Midway, Daniel Ellis arrived, summoned as a civilian witness, his civilian shirt rumpled, eyes shadowed from hospital vigils. He stood at the table's end, voice steady. "Tommy's home now, thanks to her. And the dog, Reyes, is an old buddy, told stories at a barbecue last month. The kid latched on, called it his secret signal. No harm meant." Hale absorbed it, then dismissed Ellis with a nod. The room reset, tension coiling tighter as Thorne posed the core. "Sergeant, in a live op, would you override again?" Eleanor paused, the weight of eyes upon her, Hale's scrutiny. Crow's subtle encouragement, Grant's neutral pen. Rex's image lingered on the screen, frozen in alert. "Sir, the chain is foundation, but a dog's truth is the edge. I'd assess, report, act to mitigate. Lives depend on both." The words hung, a bridge between duty and doubt, the moral tension she'd carried since the shelter now laid bare. By 1100, Hale adjourned, promising a decision within 48 hours. "Stand by, Vasquez. This isn't judgment, it's refinement." Elena saluted, exiting into the corridor where sunlight slanted through high windows, warming the concrete. Crow fell in step beside her, his boots syncing with hers. "Held the line," he murmured, clapping her shoulder lightly. "Unit's got your back." But as she headed to retrieve Rex, the base's pulse around her, trucks idling, a K9 team drilling in the yard, felt charged with ripples. Word leaked fast, whispers in the chow line, a local reporter sniffing at the gate. Her choice had spotlighted the fracture, K9 intuition versus command rigidity, and now under public gaze, it demanded reckoning. Rex waited in his run, tail thumping once as she approached, his eyes locking on hers with that quiet knowing. The inquiry was just the opening salvo. The true test loomed in the consequences that would reshape not just her path, but the unit's trust in the unseen bonds that held them together. The afternoon sun beat down on the parade grounds of Camp Pendleton, turning the asphalt into a shimmering haze that distorted the ranks of the K9 unit, assembled for the post-inquiry briefing. Eleanor stood at the front, Rex at her heel, his flanks rising and falling in measured rhythm with the distant crash of Pacific waves. The air was thick with the scent of sun-baked canvas from the nearby tents and the faint, metallic tang of dog tags clinking against collars as the handlers shifted in formation. Colonel Hale paced the low platform, his boots thudding softly on the wood, microphone in hand, his voice carrying over the assembled 20-odd teams with the precision of a field order. "This incident at the mock shelter underscores a critical intersection," Hale began, his gaze sweeping the lines, pausing briefly on Elena before moving on. "Protocol ensures cohesion. K9 intuition amplifies it. Sergeant Vasquez's actions, while outside standard vector, demonstrated adaptive judgment, that preserved a civilian life. Murmurs rippled through the ranks, subtle nods from handlers like Torres, who adjusted his lead with a quick glance at his own shepherd. Crow stood to Elena's right, arms crossed, his expression a mask of neutral approval, though she caught the faint relaxation in his jawline. The colonel's words weren't exoneration, but they weren't indictment either. In the military's measured cadence, this was progress, a pivot toward integration rather than punishment. Elena kept her eyes forward, the weight of her utility belt a steady pressure against her hips. Rex's warmth pressing against her leg like an unspoken endorsement. The briefing unfolded procedurally. Hale outlined interim findings from the JAG review, no UCMJ violation, but a mandated revision to K9 protocols. Effective immediately, handlers will incorporate secondary alert perimeters in urban drills. Certification for K9 rerouting will be emphasized in quarterly quals. He gestured to a projector screen behind him, where a simple diagram appeared. The shelter layout, arrows marking Rex's path from entrance bulk to great detection. The image lingered, a visual testament to the fracture now being mended. The boy's rescue marked not as anomaly, but as operational enhancement. As the formation broke, handlers dispersing to kennels with clipped commands. Heal. Easy. Crow pulled Elena aside near the water troughs, where the trickle of refilling lines provided a veil of white noise. Rex lapped steadily at a bowl, his tongue rasping against the metal, droplets scattering onto the concrete. "Hale's playing it smart," Crow said, voice low, his eyes scanning for eavesdroppers. Media's circling. Local station ran a blurb on the hero dog this morning. "Keeps the brass happy, shields the unit from deeper digs." Elena nodded, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow, the salt stinging her skin. The exposure gnawed at her. She joined for the shadows of service, not spotlights, but the boy's recovery had thrust them into view, his father's grateful call that morning, a reminder of lives beyond the chain. Word spread through the base like radio chatter. In the mess hall, over trays of rehydrated rice and MRE packets, handlers swapped stories of Rex's refusal, the whisper of Reyes's name adding a layer of quiet legend. Daniel Ellis had stopped by the kennels unannounced, his civilian truck idling at the gate until security cleared him. He approached Elena as she brushed Rex down in the run, the currycomb gliding through the Malinois' coat, releasing puffs of dust into the slanting light. "Sergeant," Ellis said, extending a hand, his grip firm but calloused from sight work. "Tommy's asking to see the dog again. Docs say he's clear. Scratches healed, no lasting shakes. That code." Reyes cooked it up as a game, but it stuck. Eleanor set the comb aside, Rex leaning into the touch with a contented rumble. "Glad he's safe, sir. Just doing the job." But Ellis's eyes held more. Gratitude laced with the civilian's awe at military precision. "Heard about the inquiry. If there's fallout, Tommy's story's yours. Kids drawing pictures of Rex for the unit." He left a small envelope, sealed and unmarked, which Elena opened later in the ready room. A child's sketch, crayon lines of a dog at a grate, a soldier kneeling, the name Reyes scrawled in wobbly letters. It sat on her desk amid log sheets, a fragile bridge between the rigid world of orders and the human pulse beneath. By evening, the ripples extended upward. Hale summoned Crow and Elena to his office in the command building, the room's walls lined with commendation plaques that gleamed under desk lamps, the air conditioned to a crisp chill that raised gooseflesh on her arms. Rex waited outside, tethered to a post, his soft whines filtering through the door like Morse code. "Vasquez," Hale said, motioning her to a chair opposite his desk, papers stacked neatly before him. "Your record stands. No mark. But this prompts change. I'm green-lighting a pilot. K9 intuition overrides in high-stakes sims, with handler discretion logged for review." His tone was formal, but a nod toward Crow betrayed the shift. Mentorship over reprimand, the institution bending without breaking. Crow chimed in, outlining the rollout. Joint sessions with SEAL consultants. Reyes potentially looped in for tactics refreshers. Elena's pulse quickened at the name, the circle closing, her old instructor's lessons now woven into protocol, the boy's whisper catalyzing quiet reform. "Sir, Rex's bond. It's what made the difference," she said, voice even. Hale leaned back, the leather chair creaking. "Precisely. Loyalty like that isn't trained, it's earned. Use it to train others." As they exited, the base lights flickered on against the deepening dusk, stars pricking the sky over the bluffs, the hum of night patrols underscoring the fragile equilibrium. Back at the kennels, Eleanor walked Rex through the cooling paths, his paws padding softly on dew-slick grass, the ocean's murmur a constant undertow. The day's weight lifted incrementally, not absolution, but alignment, her defiance reframed as foundation. Handlers nodded as they passed, a subtle salute in their eyes, the unit's cohesion strengthened by the test. In the quiet, with Rex's steady gait beside her, Elena felt the legacy stir. One dog's refusal, one whispered name, reshaping the chain, not through rebellion, but through the moral courage to trust what lay beyond commands. Tomorrow's drills would carry it forward, a silent evolution in the ranks. If this story already has your respect, hit the like button. It helps the story of Elena Vasquez reach those who still believe in honor. The weeks following the inquiry blurred into a rhythm of refined drills and quiet evaluations. The Camp Pendleton training fields alive with the steady cadence of paws and boots under the relentless coastal sun. Elena Vasquez moved through it all with measured precision. Her fatigues dusted in fine sand that clung like a second skin, the salt-laced breeze carrying the distant bark of dogs in rotation. Rex trotted at her heel during the new protocol sessions, his ears flicking toward the handlers gathered in loose formation, their leads taut in gloved hands. The pilot program, born from that single refusal at the shelter's edge, had taken root swiftly, its guidelines etched into fresh binders distributed at morning briefings. Secondary alert perimeters mandatory, canine intuition logged as primary data in anomaly scenarios. Master Sergeant Crow oversaw the integration, his voice booming across the mock urban site, now reinforced with mapped subchambers and hazard flags fluttering from chain-link perimeters. Handlers emphasize reroute signals. He directed one crisp dawn. The sky streaked in pale rose as floodlights cut through lingering fog. Elena demonstrated first, clipping Rex's lead and guiding him toward the shelter's entrance, a structure updated with reinforced grates and sensor nodes, the concrete still echoing faintly with the memory of dripping water. Rex paused as before, nose lifting to sample the air. But this time, Elena signaled the override without hesitation, her hand gesturing left in the approved pattern. He pivoted smoothly, leading the team to a simulated void where a mannequin lay hidden, its distress call a muffled recording from hidden speakers. The unit watched, postures alert, the air humming with the low whine of other dogs sinking to Rex's focus. Private Torres, now tasked with logging the exercise, jotted notes on his tablet, the screen's glow reflecting in his eyes. "Alert confirmed, Sergeant. 90 seconds to locate." Elena nodded, unclipping the lead as the team extracted the dummy, her gloved fingers brushing Rex's flank in a silent commendation. No longer a fracture, her actions had become curriculum, the boy's rescue dissected in after-action reviews, anonymized for security but threaded with the lesson: trust the bond, document the deviation, adapt the chain. Word of the reform filtered upward, reaching joint commands during a quarterly evaluation at the base's operations center. Colonel Hale presented the findings to a panel of brass from Quantico, the room's polished oak table ringed by chairs that creaked under the weight of stars and bars. Elena stood at parade rest in the back, Rex tethered nearby. His soft breaths the only counterpoint to the projector's whir. Hale's pointer traced the diagram on screen, the shelter layout, arrows arcing from bulk to breakthrough. "This evolution enhances operational resilience," he stated, his voice steady over the rustle of briefing packets. "K9 assets now incorporate intuitive overrides, reducing response time by 20% in trials." Sergeant Vasquez's initiative catalyzed it. The panel nodded, questions probing metrics, false positive rates, integration with drone sweeps, scalability to forward deployments. Elena's name surfaced not as outlier but exemplar, her service jacket updated with a commendation memo. Discreet, internal, the kind that opened doors to instructor roles without fanfare. Harlan Reyes, looped in remotely for the session, appeared via secure video link from his San Diego consultancy, his weathered face filling the screen, eyes sharp behind reading glasses. "The whisper worked, because the dog listened first," he said, his tone gravelly from years of salt air and silenced ops. "Vasquez gets that. Train it into the system, and you've got unbreakable teams." Elena met his gaze through the feed. A subtle nod exchanged. The mentorship full circle, his stories no longer casual tales, but embedded doctrine. After the briefing, Reyes messaged her privately. "Proud kid. The boy's code saved him. Your trust made it real." She pocketed the phone, walking Rex back through the base's winding paths, the gravel crunching underfoot. The evening chill settling as patrols lit the horizon in pools of sodium light. Tommy Ellis had visited once more, cleared for a supervised outing, his small hand buried in Rex's fur during a kennel tour. "He remembers," the boy said, grinning up at Elena. The scratches on his arms faded to faint lines. Daniel Ellis lingered at the gate, thanking Crow with a firm handshake, his contractor badge glinting. "Unit stronger for it. Tommy draws Rex every night. Says he's a guardian." The transformation rippled outward, subtle as a tide shift. In the handler's ready room, conversations turned from gripes to grapples, how to balance lead and instinct when a whine trumped a vector. Crow mentored the juniors personally, pulling Torres aside after shifts to review logs, the fluorescent hum underscoring their talks. "Vasquez showed us the edge," he'd say, tapping a folder stamped with the new protocol seal. Elena took on training rotations, her sessions drawing quiet respect, handlers lingering post-drill to ask about Rex's cues, the Malinois becoming a unit mascot in understated ways, a paw-print stencil on the kennel door, a framed sketch from Tommy in the mess hall lounge. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the bluffs in gold, Eleanor and Rex patrolled the perimeter alone, the fence line humming with razor wire under the wind's whisper. The shelter loomed in the distance, now a hub for advanced sims, its grates secured but open to the lessons learned. Rex's nose worked the breeze, alert but content, his tail giving a single sweep against her leg. No words passed, just the rhythm of their steps, the faint radio static from her shoulder mic confirming all clear. In that silence, Elena felt the legacy settle, not as medal or promotion, but as the quiet reform she'd sparked, a system yielding to the truth of loyalty, where a dog's refusal could guide not just a rescue, but the ranks themselves. Months later, during a joint exercise with a SEAL detachment, Elena briefed the cross-unit teams on the protocol, her voice carrying over the assembled lines, Rex at her side like a sentinel. The SEALs nodded, one veteran echoing Reyes's cadence in his questions, the circle widening. Her integrity had woven into the fabric, moral strength not in defiance, but in the disciplined choice to honor what commands couldn't touch. The base, once rigid in routine, now breathed with adaptive trust, a testament to the human vulnerability that bound soldiers, dogs, and duty in unbreakable accord. In the end, As the exercise wrapped under the fading light, Elena clipped Rex's lead, their shadows merging on the dew-kissed field. One whispered name had pulled a boy from shadows. One handler's conscience had illuminated the path for all. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and justice within the ranks. Thank you for watching the case of the K9 refused to enter the shelter. Until the missing boy whispered the SEAL's name. See you in the next one.